So, one thing I found pretty fascinating about your career was getting to play the NWO Sting in WCW.
Yep.
How did that come about? Because you don't really get to see a lot of people really impersonate wrestlers and do it, and be known for that a lot of
Yeah.
times.
Yeah. So that was not my idea, of course. I was wrestling at the time as Cobra, and Cobra really wasn't going anywhere. Again, as I talked about, it was one of those things where I thought the character was okay, but and it was, and this could be my fault. I'm not blaming, the company, right? Maybe man, my interviews were so-so. I didn't really get a chance to really work on those, and I thought my wrestling was fair enough. But again, if you have the connection, you can get that development and get in, push up to that level, right? When Steve Austin was in WCW and I was there, and he was nothing like he ended up being, right? I mean, great talent, super good wrestler, right, and good on the mic, but he just wasn't being utilized properly in WCW. When he got to the WWF, WWE, and he got Stone Cold Kimmick, and he'll be the first to tell you this, that's when he found his way. That's when he was like, "Oh man, this is me. This is how you do." And if they're not investing that time and money into figuring that out for you, you're going to get lost in the shuffle because there's other guys there too. So it's very, very difficult. But anyway, I was doing Cobra, and they wanted to do this thing where the Sting went bad or whatever was that. And I think basically they kind of asked me because Steve and I were about the same size. I was a little bit heavier than him, but basically we were pretty similar in physique, right? So that was something that maybe we could pull off. And the Cobra thing wasn't going that well, so they asked me to do it, and I said, "Sure." I mean, of course, yeah, whatever you want. So they asked me, I did it, and I think also that the initial idea, and I don't know who was really making those decisions. Could have been Hogan, could have been Bischoff, could have, I don't know if there was a whole committee or Hall and Nash. I have no idea, but I think the original concept of that NWO Sting was to come out one time and just kind of cause all this chaos, right? And then, frame Steve, the real Sting, that he was part of turning or whatever like that. And that was it. And I was okay with that. I'm like, that's fine. I'll do whatever you want. I mean, I'm working for you. I'm under contract. So, I don't have a choice really. And so I did it, and I think it was good and it went over. And then they said, "Hey, why don't we kind of keep this character on the part of the NWO? He can be part of the NWO, and we can bring him out and have him cause more, havoc and chaos." So that's kind of how it, I think, initially stayed on a little bit, and then I wrestled a few matches as NWO Sting in the U.S. But what happened, and this is the transition that you'll kind of like a little bit, Stanley, is that the during that time, so the NWO started getting really popular.
Hmm.
And we had a reciprocity with New Japan at the time. So some of the talent from New Japan, like Yuji Nagata and Nakanishi, and even Chono and Muta, they were coming over here to the U.S. Chono and Muta were their big stars, and then some of the U.S. talent was going over to Japan. Scott Norton was already their IWGP Heavyweight Champion, so he had been over there for years. So there was this kind of reciprocity at that time. And when the NWO started getting popular, it went crazy in Japan, right? So they're all going, "Hey, we want the NWO here. We're going to do a big show, Tokyo Dome show." But the WCW at the time wasn't letting, the top NWO guys go over. They're not going to go over there and do a 3-week tour as the NWO. They might go over and do one shot, but Hogan and Savage and all those guys, not that they couldn't do it, obviously they've done it before, but they just weren't going to go over there and grind out a 3-week tour in Japan. It wasn't gonna happen. So they said, "Oh, you can take NWO Sting. He's available. You can take Marcus Bagwell. He's available. You can take Mike Rotundo. He's available in the NWO. You can take Brian Adams. You could. There was guys that we started getting in the NWO that they said, "Hey." Scott Norton, of course, who was already a superstar in Japan, you can take him. So that became I was working, Scott and I were working over there nonstop, during the NWO stuff because we were there every single tour wrestling. I was wrestling as NWO Sting, which at first, I was kind of mimicking Sting, but later that character becomes its own character in Japan. I started painting my face different. I started doing different moves. I started coming up with a kind of a different style. Of course, yes, it's based on NWO Sting, but the Japanese people knew the difference between NWO Sting and the real Sting, which I was good because it was allowed me to do that character for years. I did end up while Steve was just hanging out in rafters, not doing anything. I was working every single night as NWO Sting in Japan.
And it's amazing that you were able to carve out your own legacy with a variation of that gimmick that people still talk about.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was fortunate for me, and again, I was it was kind of right place, right time, if you will, for that, and then got the rub from the NWO. So once you get that, and then the rest of it, to be honest, I earned. So you have to go over there. If you weren't successful, believe me, they would have said, "Well, bring us another NWO person. We don't want this NWO Sting guy. He's stinking up the ring." So so the rest of it, I went over there and just by hard work and determination made that character over. And
Yes.
with a lot of help from New Japan, like I said, Masa Saito and Black Cat and everybody that was there, and Scott Norton and all these people that helped guide me. But I made that character into something that was at one point, and I brag about this some. They come out with a rating every year for gaijins, and they put, like Vader was one of the top. Scott is always at the top. Stan Hansen was at the top. And one year that they came out, I was number five. I think I was the fifth rated gaijin in the country, and Steve was like down the list, maybe 10 or 11 or whatever. So they knew the difference, in Japan. So that was a kind of a proud moment for me, the fact that I'd worked that hard on the character and I got some recognition. Not in the